Welcome back, everybody, to Waadaplaya Concussion Sub series after a heavy white ball season, and it just concluded World Cup. We are switching over slowly but surely into red ball season and a pinnacle of Test cricket for England and Australia, the Ashes. We're going to preview a big series coming up, Australia home series. To talk about it all, after a while, we got Gorillas back on Waadaplaya. Nakul Pande, Tony Bishop, and Bear. How are you?
All
Doing
good,
well.
man.
Yeah, delighted to be back. Thanks, someone.
Riding on the back of Watford's magnificent win against Manchester United yesterday. I'm surfing a high.
Nice. So, what is Guerilla Cricket been up to? Similar to bubble fatigue and players playing a long period of time, are you seeing a broadcasting fatigue in Guerilla?
I think it's fair to say it's been a squad game over the last little while. Doing the IPL straight into the World Cup was a lot of fun, but I think all of us are quite glad that we've had a little bit of time off.
Yeah,
recently.
indeed. Plus, T20 is so not predictable, but so the same all the time. It's just going to be nice. It's going to be weird doing red ball cricket again, but having time to just take the game in rather than just bang all the time is going to be nice, I think.
Games that'll last hopefully more than 3 days. They'll be good. I say hopefully.
Well, when you're up overnight, I'm not convinced that more than I don't want 5-day games. 4 days, 3.5 is optimum length, I think.
We shall see. We've got a day-nighter, don't forget.
Yeah,
that's a slightly more sociable time, which is the second one, isn't it? That's Adelaide, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that'll be like the India series where you're not quite sure whether to go to bed or not.
Right into the schedule, there are 5 tests coming up. First test starts 8th of December, Gabba, which is what India reached last year.
The Gabba.
Yes, and then, like you guys mentioned, we switch over to the Adelaide Oval for the day and nighter. Third test, as usual, Boxing Day in Melbourne, and then the New Year's test starting 5th of January in Sydney, and then the 5th test concludes at Perth, which is Optus Stadium. So Gabba, Brisbane. What can we expect? Does England have it to beat Australia again, like India?
In theory, if India's 6th, 7th, and 8th choice fast bowlers and 4th and 5th choice spinner, one of whom isn't really a spinner, can beat a pretty much full strength Australia, there's no particular reason why England should fear the Gabba in the way that they have done in the past, because England have had some horror shows at the Gabba. That really 10-11 is the only one in recent times where it hasn't gone horrifically wrong from the start of the tour.
Summon up the spirit of 86-87. The team that couldn't bat, couldn't bowl, couldn't field. That was the last time England won at the Gabba. Both of them dominated that game. And we won the series, of course. They won that series under Gatting.
Before potentially any of this squad were born, it wouldn't be that many.
It's not just England, though, is it? I mean, at the Gabba, isn't it? Australia have won 40 out of 63 until they lost to India. They hadn't lost since.
And that's why that was such a big deal. And I think the psychological stranglehold isn't quite as strong going into that series. It's very difficult to predict the pitches going into this because the Gabba is not actually a drop-in surface, unlike some of the pitches, for example, Melbourne and Adelaide. But Australia haven't played any Test cricket in nearly a year, so we really have no idea what the pitches are going to be like at this stage.
And also, was India's test at the Gabba? Wasn't that the last in the series? It wasn't the first.
That was the last, yeah.
It was the last. I think it's different, it being the last rather than the first as well.
Yeah, for England, it's historically always the first.
It's always the first, yeah, because they like to beat us first, don't they?
Get their retaliation in early.
Well, exactly, but I think it's different for India because it was the last in the series, and actually India had come back really well, and with that side that was a patchwork and the pride that was at stake, and actually they kind of outplayed them in the series after losing that first test so horrifically. I'm not sure it'll be the same for England. I was having this conversation on WhatsApp. When's the last time we actually won a test in bloody Australia? It was an awful long time ago.
Yeah.
So, we lost the last series 4-0 and the one before that 5-0.
It's been 10 years.
Yeah. So, having said that, Australia aren't the strength that they were at that time, I'd say. I mean, the bowling attack as per normal is shit hot, but Labuschagne is probably going to be an issue. Smith is not in the purple patch that he was 2 years ago. Well, still a classy batsman. Warner's discovered some form in T20, but is that going to transmit to a test match? And if you can get Broad in first and knock him over a couple of times early, is he just going to go back in his shell? All questions to be answered.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go into the squads, we do have the last 5 Ashes series results, which we gathered. So going back till 2013, of course, the 2019 was a drawn series, but because Australia won the 2017-18, they retained the Ashes. 2017 and 18, it was 4-0 Australia. 2015, it was 3-2 England, closely fought series. Going back to 13 and 14, Australia 5-0, that was a drubbing. And then 2013 was 3-0. So what can we expect in 21 and 22 series? 5 test match series again.
I think there's question marks against both teams, though, aren't there? Not only just behind the scenes. Australia's lack of test match cricket. England has certainly spent more time playing tests. Disruption in terms of the captaincy for Australia. England's biggest challenge is going to be that they've been nurturing a philosophy and an expectation that they were going to arrive with a kind of a phalanx of fast bowlers to knock Australia with, who have not quite simultaneously, but systematically have by and large all fallen over themselves through injury. So a lot of what you're left with the 2 old gunslingers. It's like Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp for one last showdown with Anderson and Broad. I think England's challenge is in the attack. There's some inexperience. They're heavily reliant on root, but so much of their preparation, thinking ahead to the Ashes, has been genuine pace. Take them on with genuine pace, and we lose Stone and we lose Archer, and we've got Wood, who, let's face it, if he gets through a game and a test and a half, will be more than we probably expect. England's only bit is, can England readjust the way they tackle this with the resources that they have? And I genuinely think if they can, they're in with a chance. But that is a massive question mark. It's a shift from what they were hoping for.
There's been a wobbliness to the Australian batting lineup for a while, even post the return of Smith and Warner. A lot was talked about when Australia named their last group of contracted players that there actually weren't very many batters in the squad in the contract list. And we go into this series. We know who's gonna open with. We know it's gonna be Warner and Harris opening. We know Labuschagne. We know Labuschaigne's gonna bat 3. We know Smith's gonna bat 4. Assume Cameron Green is gonna bat number 6. Tim Payne, if he is retained in the squad, which is now not a given, will bat 7. Just don't know. Usman Khawaja has been in great form and looks as though he's going to get that number 5 slot. And editorializing for a second, it's a mystery to me that Australia haven't used Usman Khawaja more and that he was ever left out of this Australian team, being the player that he is. And then the bowling attack looks very solid, but Marcus Harris had a dreadful series against India. Has had to rebuild his confidence in first class cricket. Had a poor Ashes in 2019. Smith, as Bear said, started to look human during that India series, and India found ways to restrict his run scoring. Labuschagne similarly wasn't able to kick onto those huge scores that we know he can get. And David Warner, that 2019 World Cup is the best he's batted in 2 years or more than that, maybe. No, 2 years, I think, since that 2019 in Ashes. And India were able to find ways to stop all of those guys scoring. They bowled very straight. They bowled not too full. They were able to get some life out of the surfaces. The Australian pitches, thankfully for, as someone who doesn't really pick a horse in the Ashes and finds a lot of the Anglo-Australian back and forth a little bit tedious. The pitches have been a lot better in Australia than they were at the 2017-18 Ashes, where certainly that Melbourne test is one of the most boring test matches boring sporting events I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. But we saw in both the series where India have toured recently and when Pakistan toured, we have seen the pitches have some life to them. You can get seam movement. You can get a little bit of swing, and the spinners have had some joy. We've seen Ashwin and Nathan Lyon do really well. And if that's the case, if the pitches do aid some seam movement, then England with Anderson and Broad and Ollie Robinson, who I think is coming on magnificently as a bowler, and then rotate through Stokes will now play and hopefully be able to bowl some, and then you rotate.
Robinson does have the benefit of having some experience in Australia because he did very well, I think, for the Lions in 2020 or 21. He did really well at the MCG, didn't he? Took 7 wickets or so. So at least he's got some Aussie soil. He's got some experience on Aussie soil, which would be helpful for him.
Yeah, I mean Anderson and Broad obviously have huge amounts of experience, and Broad has done actually quite well in Australia. I mean the issue. In 2017-18, Anderson bowled extremely well, but there was no penetration at all at the other end, with none of the other bowlers being able to looking like a threat, and so Australia could just play out Anderson. I was a little disappointed they didn't pick Matt Parkinson to at least have the option of him bowling leg spin and genuinely turning the ball and getting some bounce, and he's got a very solid first-class record for somebody that young bowling leg spin. I think Jack Leach could be handy as an option. Certainly you'd expect him to bowl consistently, and he can get some bounce and he can get a little bit of turn if there is some.
Not bowled in Australia though, has he? Again,
in the wicket, he hasn't. But neither would any of the spinners that England would have picked.
No.
If you can get some bounce out of the surface as a spin bowler, you will be enjoying yourself a little bit. We saw Ashwin bowling with a new ball quite a lot on Australia on 2 recent tours. Now, obviously, there is a quality gap between Lyon and Ashwin and Jadeja and Leach, but I think Jack Leach is a solid bowler. That does mean it's a tricky decision as to what seam attack you pick, and I think can England play Anderson and Broad together in the 11? Certainly not for every test, I wouldn't imagine. I'd be surprised if, and I think it would be a mistake if there weren't rotation on both sides in the fast bowling attack, but which attack England go in with is an interesting question, and how much they can get out of Mark Wood is an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, for my thoughts, I think Jack Leach should probably be in most starting 11s. It's always handy to have a spinner. I mean, the tracks are reasonably, if they're going to be reasonably hard, there will be bounce. And as you said, he's a quick learner. I reckon Leach is a quick learner. He's actually a very good bowler. It's just it doesn't suit him to bowl a lot in England, unfortunately. I think Ollie Pope's going to be surprised. I'm not Ollie Pope. Ollie Robinson's going to be surprised here. The comparisons to McGrath are uncanny, really. And he's taller than McGrath, and he bowls that solid line short of a length. And he could be a little bit of a secret weapon. And because he's quite economical with his action, I think he'll probably bowl the majority of the series, I'd have thought, which leaves either Broad or Anderson having a test off or 2. I think Mark Wood, again, if it's sunny, which generally is, it's bloody Australia, let's face it, you get the ball roughed up. I think Mark Wood will have a part to play in 2 or 3 tests, and he's good at reverse swinging. And of course, the great thing is that we got Ben Stokes back, which we can add this balance in, that we can pick 3 seamers and Jack Leach. And then you can have Stokes in at your 5, and you've got your 4 seam bowlers still. I noticed that bloody both of them were saying that Stokes should bowl more, and I think a lot of England people probably would like to see him. He's an aggressive bowler. When he gets his back up, he can be pretty aggressive. Not the quickest, but he's bloody aggressive. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Leach plays a bigger part in the series than we've seen in recent series. I think Dom Bess is a waste of space, to be honest. I don't know why the hell he's on that tour. I'd have taken Matt Parkinson. I don't think Crawley will get much of a game. I think England will open with the usual 2 that we've had. Darryl Milan will bat 3. That'd be my bet.
Milan, I think, will be suited to Australia. I mean, he made those runs at the Wacker, didn't he? He likes to play the ball late. He likes to play the ball under his eye line. Even though he was, for a while, the number 1 T20 batsman in the world, in some ways, I think he's better suited to red ball that's really coming onto the back pretty quickly. So, I mean, he should be fairly optimistic, I think. England will also be looking at who they've got in that Lions squad, because, they're also in Australia and pretty accessible, aren't they? And you do have Parkinson in that Lions squad. So I think England's thinking is, if they need to expand or change tack a little bit, they've got some resources there they can do it with. Parkinson would be certainly one of the first you'd look at.
Saqib Mahmood potentially as well if you have an injury. Bryden Carse unfortunately won't be part of that squad. He's a potentially useful quick quick bowler. He's got a knee injury, so he won't be making that squad. The issue that a lot of people have picked out is that you have a lot of samey-ish bowlers, and I don't think that Anderson and Broad and Wokes and Robinson are actually that similar as bowlers, but Wood is the only. You've got Wood as the point of difference, and then Stokes bowling reverse swing. Chris Wokes' role is really interesting. He's one of those. He looked a much better cricket. He looks to have improved dramatically off what was already a very good bowler this summer. He has a little bit more pace than people think he does. He can move the ball off the surface as well as in the air. If there is a little bit of assistance, he's a very dangerous bowler. If there isn't, how effective is he actually going to be able to be? Because he doesn't. While he's not slow exactly, he doesn't. You don't get the feeling that the ball hits the bat hard with Chris Wokes in the same way that it does for, say, Ollie Robinson or for all of Australia's bowlers. And then going through the rest, he'll be root at 4, Stokes probably batting 5 and bowling 1 quick spell at some point, depending on how his hand is. Presumably, they'll go in with the extra batter, Ollie Pope and Joss Buttler at 7, presumably rather than batting Buttler and Wokes at 7 as they have done in England. I think that probably isn't so necessary now that Stokes is available. Pope / Bairstow, I guess, depending on which way you want to go with that. I'm not entirely sure which way they'll go with that. I could see Johnny Bairstow having some fun in the middle, having a decent run in the middle order on bouncy pitches that don't move that much relative to England, certainly. But you could also say the same of Ollie Pope. So I think that whether they select Leach, and I really hope they do, and don't repeat the mistake that they did this summer where Leach didn't play, the selection of the fast bowlers and that number 6 slot is the open slots for England, I think.
If you're looking for spin options, there is the secret weapon in the Lions squad of Mason Crane. 1 for 193. If he wants to suddenly terrify and surprise Usman Khawaja, his only ever test wicket, there you go.
And that's probably the fear they got about Matt Parkinson, isn't it? Well, they haven't included him, but as I said to you, I don't know why Don Bess is anywhere near that squad. I'm sorry, I quite like Bess. Done nothing against him. I just don't think he's a very good bowler. And he's certainly not going to terrify any Australians.
Joe Root can tweak a few as well. So
well, exactly. Joe Root, if you want a second spinner, Joe Root's
got those leggies in his armory now as well.
He's got his leggies in his arm. He bowls flat. He bowls containing lines. I mean, most of the time, first innings, his spinner's not going to be your main weapon, is he? He's going to tie up an end coming towards a new ball when it's tired and blah, blah, blah. And if you've got Leach in the attack, fair enough. And if you want someone at the other end, Root can bowl himself 4 or 5 overs. That gets you through the last 70 to 80.
Picking Leach also allows you to not have to bowl Anderson into the ground, which is something that England have done a few times recently. And you can see his second innings numbers have really dropped off recently.
Yes,
Anderson, and he's been over bowled in the matches that he has played, which is a trick that England have fallen into recently with Jofra Archer as well, over bowling the guy who's in form. The fact that Leach can get you through 15-20 overs a day pretty economically, for the most part, I think allows you to keep the seamers fresher.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I won't like about that top 5 or whatever of the Australian is that if they'd go with Harris as a lefty as well, isn't he? So you'll have Warner Harris as lefties, 2 righties in Labuschagne and Thingamajig, and then they go Khawaja at 5. You've got another lefty, which won't please the England management if they've got Leach as their main bowler, because you want to be trying to attack the off stump, turning it away from the batsman. But then the bottom order will be you'd be hoping to bowl at mainly righties apart from Mitchell Stark, I guess. But the other thing here, and this could be Australia's plan here, if they don't want England to bowl Leach and they think Bess is the only other spinner, England won't be too scared to pick him, which would be my guess, is that you get rid of Tim Payne because he's not the greatest keeper. He's all right as a keeper, but his batting's not that great, and they might go back to Wade as their keeper.
Probably Carey would be.
Well, they've been talking about Carey. Yeah, Carey maybe as well. Either of those, probably, if Payne isn't captain, get in a side, don't they?
Just looking at the Australia A squad, because both of these teams have a sort of shadow squad that they'll be playing cricket. They'll be playing against. So England have the Lions, and there is an Australia A squad that is touring at the same time. And Alex Carey and Josh Inglis are the wicket keepers in that squad, and Carey seems to be the the likeliest pick if they are going to replace Tim Payne as a player, not just as a captain. There is no indication at the moment that that's going to happen, but it could at some point.
And will they have Cameron Green as their 6?
Looks like that will be the case. Topped the Sheffield Shield in terms of the run scoring last year. Hasn't yet taken a Test match wicket, so so his utility as an all rounder is to be determined.
That's fine.
Bowling's been compromised over the years, hasn't it? With the English curse of constant back injuries. Although I suppose that's every fast bowler's curse.
Australia haven't really had Australia don't have a long history of, or they have a long history of not having a top class all-rounder. You've got to go back until probably Alan Davidson, the late great Alan Davidson in the 60s for a genuinely high class all-rounder. And then I think they will have learned from that mistake where the Indian very obviously tired out the Australian fast bowlers through the India series. So I would be I don't think Stark, Hazelwood, if Cummins ends up captaining, which is not impossible, and he seems the most likely option at this stage, he'll presumably have to play every game. But I wouldn't expect Stark and Hazelwood to play every game. And they've got two quite interesting options. Jai Richardson, who's sort of wiry and very quick, sort of skids the ball on rather than hitting the pitch hard. And then Michael Neser, who is a bowler I'm a huge fan of. He is... I could certainly see him playing in Adelaide or on a pitch with any kind of green to it at all, because he moves the ball around both ways, in the air and off the seam, bowls quick enough, very accurate, did extremely well in... Okay, seam bowling in England's easier than it is in Australia, but it did extremely well in England this summer for Glamorgan, and has done very well in over a number of years in Sheffield Shield cricket. And there is a bit of it's one of those players, there's a bit of a movement developed around him that he should be the first cab off the rank if Australia need another fast bowler, which they will at some point. And then they do have a viable backup for Nathan Lyon and Mitchell Swepson, who's been doing very well in the Shield as well, leg spinner, quite quick leg spinner. If Nathan Lyon needs a break or does lose form, but I don't see that happening. I think they play two of them. Well, I certainly don't see them dropping Nathan Lyon immediately, because as much as he didn't have a brilliant time against India, he's still a quality bowler.
It's the big away series, it's the pinnacle, if you like. And for Australia, they're on home territory. They'll be seriously up for it. And normally, I'm really optimistic about England winning Test series anywhere, but burned the last time. My predictions for Australia, we're getting battered 4-0 here. 4-1 maybe, but I'm not really optimistic.
Where are we not going to get battered? Which ground then out of the 5 are we not
Adelaide. Adelaide, we might be able to get.
That's what people said last time, and England bowled appallingly with the new ball under lights and completely wasted the opportunity.
In the first innings, though, in the second innings, we did really well, but we'd already lost it by then.
England had a chance of winning that first Test match until James Vince got run out.
Yes,
and
run himself out on 87, wasn't it? If I remember,
it was a really good throw from Nathan Lyon, actually, that ran out. That ran him out. England, that series, England were very flat through most of that series, and Australia just kind of ground England down.
Well, we lost Stokes, haven't we? That's when he batted someone around the head in Bristol. And then, this is the flip side of that this time, is that we got the opposite, haven't we? Most of us are thinking, Stokes isn't going to make it. The balance has gone, out of the blue, just as the World Cup comes along, Stokes makes himself available, and everyone kind of thinks, that is a fillet for England, I think. He's certainly, being able to have Stokes in the side adds A, a lot more options, and B, it kind of gives you balance in that side as well. So
even if he weren't able to bowl, that's another close
balance
to world class batter.
Weighted sense, not balance in the
no. Balance with one L. That's another close to world class batter in England's lineup alongside to try and take some of the pressure off Joe Root, and somebody who Australia will put a lot of time into analysing and try and really go after, which might take some of the pressure off the likes of, for example, Hasib Hamid, who is someone who, in other circumstances, Australia might go really hard at.
I'm sure they will anyway.
In trying to create an atmosphere around him. I have no issues. I have no real concerns that he won't be able to survive. The issue is, will he be able to score runs at a decent rate? I think Rory Burns, if Australia fall into the trap of bowling too short at him, could score some runs. Milan, similarly, although he is someone who will take on any hook shot, he's never met a bouncer he didn't try and hook. David Milan. But it is. I agree with Tony that in theory, and from what we've seen in practice, his game is very well suited to most of the Australian pitches, assuming that the pitches are as they have been over the last 5 years, where they've had some bounce and a bit of movement, but not that much.
And the other thing, of course, is that if a sweep fails, I mean, actually, weirdly, Zach Crawley has been in appalling form for 12 months or so, but Australia's the kind of place that can actually get him back into form. You know, he likes to hit through the line of the ball, and if the pitches are reasonably bouncy, hard, doesn't move a lot, he'll play through the line and might quite quickly hit his straps.
The thing about that top order is that there is a limited experience in Australia.
Yeah, but I don't think that particularly matters. I think you've got to have a bit of confidence in your own ability. It's going to be. I think it's easier to bat over there than it is here in some respects. Probably harder in others. But I mean, top class batsmen tend to like the bat coming onto the ball.
You can say you're in more in Australia once you've got through that early phase than you can
if you're at
in
Melbourne,
England, where the ball just. Never ever serve a pitch like that up again, ever, please. But yeah, the ball doesn't stop moving in England at any stage of the innings. It will get a little bit easier, and you can start to wear down the opposition bowlers more in Australia. My worry about this series is that it's going to be a lot of very attritional and not particularly high quality cricket. Well, indeed.
Distract people with other stuff.
Indeed, an interesting broadcasting challenge. I hope I'm wrong, and that I hope basically it's more like the India series in terms of the pace of the game than it was the 2017 Ashes.
Yeah, let's bring Adi in, who joined us from India. So, who are your impact players on both sides, and what do you think we should expect from this Ashes series?
Hi everyone. So I think one thing which modern day international cricket kind of brings to the table is for the past decade or so, the unpredictability. I think after the Australian dominance for roughly about a couple of decades, we have never had really a team who has gone on to dominate Test cricket for a real sustainable period of time. So I think in that kind of that is owing to a bit of inconsistency with the teams, but I think that also makes up for some interesting cricket. I think on paper, if you look at both the teams, pretty well matched. However, Australia has a lot more bases covered in terms of probably having the top three most stable. I think with Warner, Marcus Harris, and Labuschagne and Smith all there. In terms of having a solid spinner who can hold one end up, England still debating between, I think, going in with three seamers and a spinner or giving lead. So in terms of, I think, not just the home advantage, even if this series was being played in England, I think even in that sense, Australia just seems to be having more bases covered. But then I think what happened last summer, I think we can't take anything for granted. And I think one thing which India series showed us was England's batting is probably not as brittle as it seems. Yes, the top three is something which is still dicey, but I think it is going to be a very tough call between picking three out of Burns, Hamid, Crawley, and probably I think Sibley. So, but still, I think with Root and Stokes in the middle order now, and I'll be very keen to see how Buttler goes about it. I think a lot of swashbuckling keeper batsmen in Australia at number 6 and 7 have had success in Test cricket, and I think Buttler has to probably shed that caution in Test cricket and just
does he have to summon up his inner Rishabh Pant?
Yeah,
probably. Yeah, Rishabh Pant, Gilchrist, I think throughout probably the 90s.
It seems odd because considering how long Butler's been around for, but he's never actually played a Test match in Australia.
No,
he hadn't yet debuted when England toured in 13-14, and he wasn't in the side in 2017-18. So that's a little bit of an unknown quantity, and again, in theory, is better suited to pitches where the ball doesn't move as much for as long. On the opening pair, Dom Sibley's in the Lions squad. He's managed to get. He's not even in the the full strength, the full squad. I would be very surprised if Burns and Hamid don't get the series. I think something would have to go disastrously wrong, or an injury, I suppose, which could always happen for that not to be the case. I've come up with a few different iterations of what England's seam attack is going to be, and it looks increasingly. I think they're going to have to be very, very selective about when they play Anderson and Broad together. Basically, I
think just one question, Nakul, for you and I think everyone on the panel would be: if Anderson and Broad are available for the first test, is it still the best seam attack going in with Anderson Broad? I think it was at Brisbane, right? The first test. So, and
probably
probably having maybe Anderson, Wood, and maybe Vokes in place of Broad would make for a more rounded attack, slightly more depth in the batting.
I think, I'm not sure you'd play them together. I kind of agree with you. I think you'd look at Robinson, Wood, and Wokes obviously is another all-rounder anyway.
It's an odd thing to say given how good Anderson and Broad are, and they've both had success in Australia. And actually, Stuart Broad has bowled as well as any England bowler in Australia for a long time at times. But the one I look at that list of bowlers, and the one bowler I'm leaving out last, as it were, is Ollie Robinson.
Yeah, me too.
100%.
Absolutely. I think we are too, and we may be proved wrong as well. But I mean, he certainly looks the deal, doesn't he? I mean, I would be surprised if the first test didn't start off. Honestly, I know we're all English and we think this, but I mean, if you look at stats, you would probably have to go in with Anderson, Broad, Robinson as your fourth start. And then the question is, do you have you go for 5 seamers, or do you stick Jack Leach in there? And if you were to go with a 5th seamer, you'd probably go Wood. And I think that I think your rotation comes actually probably, as I said, I think I'll probably, assuming Ollie Robinson bowls like I think he was, I think Robinson is the stick on for every test if you can get it out of him. He is also the youngest of the lot. And then your rotation becomes between Wood, Wokes, Broad, and Anderson, and you pick two out of 3.
But now that you have Ben Stokes, does Ollie Robinson probably?
No, because Ollie Robinson.
You're not getting 25 overs out of Ben Stokes.
No.
Nor should you try to, actually, because I think he's much more valuable as a batter than he is and as an impact bowler. Than as a frontline bowler, which he's never been for England. He's never actually been a frontline bowler, and I don't think you can ask him to do so now, having had such a long break. None of the Australian batters will be looking forward to facing Ollie Robinson.
Not only that, you've got to think in the average, in a modern test, session, it's 2 hours. Barely do we get, 24, 20. I mean, we're supposed to get 30 overs in a test match session. Barely do we get 27. So you're only bowlers bowl 5, and then last summer, someone was bowling like 3, then you bring on a second bowler, and then you basically rotate. You've got to find kind of half an hour possibly at the end of a session. And the first 2 sessions, you go back to one of your opening bowlers as well. And it's only the last session of the day where things get a bit tricky. So I'd be surprised if Ben Stokes bowls more than 5 overs in the first 2 sessions of a day, unless it's desperate. And at the end of the day, when everyone else is knackered, he can have a real pop.
The intriguing Robinson and Stokes have both bowled very long 8-9 over spells at times recently.
Yeah.
Stokes, the way England have started using Stokes in the last couple of years is that they'll bowl him basically 1 spell a day, but 1 long spell a day. Because one of those bowlers, he just kind of gets on a roll, and I think he's probably someone you don't have too many conversations with when he's bowling. You don't really, almost at times, should try harder to get the ball out of his attack so he doesn't knacker himself out a bit. And he can get the ball to reverse swing at pace, which he's done to India a few times, getting the ball to come back into the right hander. The balance, obviously, then is if you were wanting to play, say, Buttler at 6 and then go in with 4 specialist seamers plus Leach, you'd want one of them to be Chris Wokes at number 7, because Ollie Robinson is a decent batter, but probably is not a test match number 7. And then beyond that, Leach Broad, Anderson, Wood. Wood is probably the most reliable of those with the bat, and even then it's a thrash, really. So you've got to balance that as well, which is probably why I suspect that Anderson, Broad, Robinson, Leach, and Stokes would be my attack going into the first test.
Interesting. And I'm surprised you guys are ruling out Mark Wood. With his pace, don't you think he will come in handy and probably take a 5 for
I think the only tricky part with Mark Wood is that the two best venues where he could be most effective would be, I think, Brisbane and Perth traditionally. And the first test is in Brisbane. So that's a slightly tricky call. I think in recent times in Test cricket, if I had to probably draw an analogy, I think India took a similar call a couple of years back. I think when they gave Bumrah the Test cap in South Africa, that was a completely, I think, out of line call. He was not in the pecking order, and India already had 3 frontline seamers, but they went for horses for courses and they picked Bumrah, and it kind of worked out. So I think it will be more of probably elimination than selection for England pace attack, because Anderson, you have to pick him. I mean, for the first test, Ollie Robinson on form, and then I think the final call between Broad and Wood would be, and even Wokes for his batting ability, then becomes slightly tricky.
Yeah. The other problem with Wokes is that while he is very, very quick, he's not someone who, what you would talk about hitting the deck hard, hitting the pitch and hitting the deck hard. He skids the ball onto the bat. He doesn't have a lot else beyond that pace. He doesn't move the ball that much. He can get a little bit of swing every now and again.
He gets reverse.
He gets some reverse every now and again, but like in terms of just raw quality as a Test match bowler, he's nowhere near the level of, for example, Jofra Archer, who England would have potentially had available to them, but for a couple of very significant injuries to him. Wood is at Test level. I mean, he's done really well a couple of times in South Africa on really spicy pitches where the ball was flying through, and in the West Indies as well. I don't think these pitches are going to be that quick. They may have a little bit of life to them, and we have seen that the ball moves. We certainly see the 17-18, the 2 India series most recent. We have seen the ball move off the seam, and we haven't seen a little bit of swing at times, and they've not been as dead as they have been. But they're not going to be flying through throat height, rib height, chest height every significantly. So I think you've got to be very sparing with how you use Mark Wood, quite apart from the fact that if you try and use him more than that, he will break.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's quite interesting if you look at the last 10 years, wicket takers. Nathan Lyon is actually top at Brisbane in Test matches, but at an average of about 31. But then after him, it would not surprise you, Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins in order of wickets taken. Cummins gets his wickets at under 18 at Brisbane. So it's quite interesting. You'd think it would be all pace. In actual fact, your top wicket taker there is a spinner.
I dare say Nathan Lyon has bowled a lot of overs at Brisbane.
Yeah, he has.
As part of a 4 bowler attack.
408, which is double anybody else. The next nearest, nearly double. Mitchell Stark's bowled 288.
But I think even the historic Gabba test that I think India won, Washington Sundar, if I remember correct, picked up 3-4 in the first innings, and he's also not a real big turner of the ball. So I'm a big believer that until and unless it's a real green top, you have to pick in at least one spinner. And I think in England's case, obviously it has to be Jack Leach with the current form, but I think Dom Best, with the number of left-handers Aussies have, has an outside chance. However, I think Jack Leach would be the safer option to go in with, especially with Stokes also coming in.
There's a quality gap between Leach and Best.
The problem is Best just doesn't have the control to be. I mean, you saw that in India. Sorry, I mean, he fell apart.
Experience too. I think Best is less of experience as well compared to Leach. So I would think Leach will go ahead.
Best, even for other bowlers of that sort of age profile, hasn't actually bowled that much in first-class cricket. He's rebuilding his confidence as a first-class bowler, and he did so to some extent with Yorkshire and bowled quite well at times this summer. I'm surprised that he made the main squad rather than the Lions squad, and that Mark Parkinson wasn't taken as the option. I guess they want to get Mark Parkinson playing for the Lions and playing rather than just having him around the group. But I would have made the call the other way.
See, that might be the plan. Get him to play, don't need him. At least he's been playing and put him straight in the test side. Who knows?
So,
but this is quite a conservative England team, and it's got more conservative as England have lost a few Test matches this year.
This theory of, I think, left-handers, probably left-arm spinners not succeeding against left-handers is also, I mean, it is slightly overrated, to be honest. I think Ravindra Jadeja in India have had probably as much success against left-handers than probably Ashwin. So it finally boils down to quality. I think that's where Leach clearly scores above Bess.
Okay, so starting with Bear, predictions of 5 Test Ashes series.
For once, I'm going for us losing. I'm gonna go. I don't think there'll be any draws. There's going to be no rain, is there? I'm going to go. We're going to lose 4-1.
Ouch, Adi.
I don't see Australia losing 2 back-to-back home summers, but I feel it will be slightly more closer than 4-1. So I think 3-2 to Australia.
Tony?
I'm going 4-1. I think England will get something somewhere, but I think just lack of experience and just so much of their game plan has been nurturing fast bowlers that now aren't going to be there. And I think they, whether they've been able to change gear enough with the resources they've now got, I think it's going to be very difficult. So I'm going 4-1 Australia.
Nakul?
3-1 Australia with a rain-affected draw at the venue that has lost more days of Test cricket to rain than any other, Sydney.
Yeah.
Interesting. So no chance for England.
Well, I'm putting this note in there because I've been so optimistic last time that I'm hoping that my pessimism will actually I'll be pleasantly surprised. But yeah, I can't see us getting out there with victory this time.
Yeah.
You just want early nights when you don't have to be in the studio all night. That's what you.
Well, there is that.
A quick 3-day test. I'm over with.
There is that.
A couple of nights in your own bed.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But yeah.
All right, you guys are going to get a lot of slack on the internet with all these predictions.
I think you underestimate the pessimism of most of our England fan following.
Yeah.
Doomed.
I tell you. Yeah.
Excellent. Look forward to it. I think red ball cricket is back, so it should be good fun. Hopefully, Nakul will have good, closely contested series.